that little green shield that's still up at the. No, there was, yeah. That gives you your meeting number. And you may have that listed somewhere. That you can find. I'm not really sure.
The briefing, that print out of the.
It wasn't, no, that, it was a really weird thing. It didn't have the, meeting, number. It was the meeting registration.
Oh, right, that's right.
Yeah,
Still might have that number
and
at the end of it.
no,
No,
no, it's got Google Doc. We got WZT37LOJ at the end. Some of the other meetings have, trin.zoom.us/ and then the meeting number, but this one doesn't. That's why Megan and I were so confused this morning, we were trying to figure out what the heck we were supposed to do. So how do you start the meeting?
so you get the title there though, so you know.
That's right,
Right.
yeah.
So the meeting is started right now.
So anyone can join.
Oh, but is it recording now?
It is up there, up in the left-hand corner there, recording, it's recording to the top. But you can,
They stop it.
well, whoever set it up, set it up.
Once it's recorded.
So,
I
I mean, you can. Yeah.
Good.
Because class is right, so we're here, always started on time.
Yeah.
So 2 minutes late. Anyway, we've got an hour, and before we start, if you haven't checked your emails, they've changed the place for our 6:20 photo.
And the most more importantly, the 5:30 cocktail party.
So instead of being next to the book, it's going to be at the main entrance of the library, which from our years, the main entrance of the library was right off the quad.
Yeah.
But now you have to walk down the steps. And it's in front of there. So that's where our 6:20 picture is. And then our 6:30 dinner. Back where we had cocktails for lunch up in Mather. Upstairs.
Wait.
Yes.
What I'm most interested in
Yes,
is where.
is same place the picture. So
Oh,
what
okay.
what
To
is,
show to the. right-
we're
right-
downstairs, the entrance to the library,
Yeah.
okay?
The
And any questions about that? Talk to Teresa.
Could you
Yes.
clarify, just Scott here, as you were speaking, I had asked somebody at registration that question, where the photos were taken, because there seemed to be contradictory information in the booklet. So it's in the library downstairs? Or-
Yes, yeah, so they moved it because of the predicted rain,
Oh,
okay? So ignore what's in your book, but speaking of your book. This program, Legacy. Brilliantly written introduction to what this program is about in the book. But as briefly indicated there, okay, Legacy is when we go. What remains of us in various respects, and the more that I thought about Legacy, the more that I realized it's a really big concept. So there's the financial component of it, that is helping future generations, either of your family or your community, the charities you care about. So one of the things that people may want to talk about is kind of the most efficient ways to do that. Second aspect of it is passing on, your personal perspectives, your values, what's important to you. We'd like future generations to understand what we care about, and maybe they will too. So how do you convey that? And the third component, as I thought about Legacy, is kind of personal history. I always harken back on historical perspective to the Kennedy-Nixon debates. And the question was posed to them back in 1960, I guess it was. What's the most important attribute that somebody can bring to the presidency? And Dick Nixon, having been Eisenhower's vice president, says experience. And John Kennedy says historical perspective. And that's always stuck with me, historical perspective. So that's kind of a third aspect of legacy. That is, we'd like future generations to kind of understood we were what we did, what adventures we had in life, what our parents and our parents, there's a continuum. And we don't exist just in a vacuum without, so that's kind of the third aspect of legacy. And so what we've contemplated here is for the next hour, for people to offer their perspectives, their insights. Some people have, like Kim has written a book called Miles to Go. And other people, Bluestone, I know, wrote a long letter to his grandchildren to convey the historical perspective and values. Other people have done other things. And before I sit down, I just mentioned there's a website that I just found out about from friends called Storywork. Does anybody use? Okay,
My kids gave it to me.
okay, great. So Bill, I'm gonna let you talk about Storywork then when we get to it. But so, as I say, we've got about an hour or so thoughts people have, and we'll just go at random. And Teresa, do we have anybody on Zoom that we have to worry about? So we don't have to worry about a microphone like we did this morning. So just kind of raise your hand and volunteer, and we'll start wherever people want to start. And Bill, since you did Storywork, I'll let you start
Okay,
the story.
I have a daughter, one of my children, my daughter, is fantastic at finding these things, and she found that as a gift. To give to not only my wife and myself, but her husband's mother and father, and also my former wife and her partner now too. So there were 3 groups of parents to write this. It's a writing thing where for a year, every week they would send us a question or a topic to write about. And sometimes there are canned questions that they can use, or they can make up their own question. The child can make those up. And so somebody's prompting us. And so we would get this assignment, basically. It was like homework assignment every week to try to answer these questions. And there were some really good questions. One of which I can just share that I can think of. I mean, there were a lot of them, but a lot of it was about ancestry as well. So they would ask us about our grandparents, but one would be like, my oldest son asked me, is right around the beginning of baseball season. He said, "What was your first experience in going into the Major League ballpark?" And that was fabulous because I remembered it in detail. It was a doubleheader between the Indians and the Yankees. No, they didn't. They split the doubleheader. But I looked and there was something like 7 Hall of Famers on the field in that day. It was just amazing. It was 53, I think, or 55. I can't remember, somewhere in that time period. Probably 55. And it was just fabulous. I mean, I just remembered a moment in the game, and I could look that up online and actually do research. Because I remember this incident where Larry Doby hit a home run leading off an inning right after he had robbed Mantle of a home run. I mean, it's just that kind of an experience. At any rate, it was just a fabulous question. So I didn't write that in detail, but there were a lot of other more personal questions. And every week we would get one. It became laborious almost after time, just to keep pushing. And I haven't done anything yet with what I wrote, other than it's in, and I want to go back, and I actually read Kim's book recently, and I think that's inspired me to go back and tie up a lot of this stuff. It's fascinating assortment of questions, and I know it was spurred by my daughter and some of her siblings that they would try to trade off on what questions we have. And I think they may have a list that you can check yourself.
Tell us the name of the website again.
Storyworth, WORTH.
They
And what-
publish it and
Yes.
they send you a bound book at the end.
Yeah, you can have made into a book, and I haven't done that yet, because there are a couple of questions. I know I made up one too, and I told about my Woodstock experience, which was very fascinating.
So there's a good device for those of us who don't have the discipline.
Right. I know, discipline is hard. I'm not.
So he gets the question, or you can also, because another friend of mine did it, so he gets the question every other week, because he found out every week being daunting. But yeah, at the end of it, then, as Dad probably, you give you they take it all, and they give it a bound book, so you.
Right, I want to do that.
You've got a great,
I probably gonna have to have 5 of them because I got 5 kids, but
great.
Five.
I know, I'm sure they'd be very happy. if I did.
If I could piggyback on that, I've been into this quite seriously for the last year and a quarter, relative to my wife who died a year and a third ago. And a number of things that I can recommend to people. There's a particular book that's called For You and I Am Gone, that has questions similar to what you speak of. A guy by the name of Steve Letter wrote it. It's a journal, a step-by-step guide to writing your ethical will. So if you want to focus on ethical questions, for example, what do you regret? When was the time you led with your heart? What makes you happy? What was the biggest failure? What got you through your greatest challenge? What is a good person? What is love? Have you ever cut someone out of your life? How do you want to be remembered? What is good advice? What will your epitaph say? What will your final blessing be? I think those are some great questions that if people are writing things or something to incorporate in, that would be those, that's a wonderful book to look at. Now, it's For You and I Am Gone. He's a Jewish rabbi who wrote the book. That's Lee. Now, relative to the story, an additional thing that with the help of my daughter, who helped do a video, which you'll all see tonight, she found something called WordPress, and WordPress has allowed my daughter and myself to basically pull together a blog. What else do they call it? A website
And Substack.
that will incorporate, for example, I wrote for 17 years about our journey with Caring Bridge. If anyone knows Caring Bridge, it's a great site to update people about if someone is sick in your family, and to inform people you don't get bogged down in advertising and things of that sort. But you can incorporate newspaper articles. We had several YouTubes related to our life. There was a book given to us relative to our life together, and all that stuff can be incorporated into WordPress, and then people can blog into it. There are maybe 50 odd, there are a lot of books that I read on grieving that are in there and represented. You can tap in and get it on Amazon, resources, family events that you might have done or family has done over time. You can incorporate all this on this site. And now it's going to cost $200 a year to keep it on the website, but I'll write it into my will that this is going to be something that my children and grandchildren will be able to see and see who we were and the meaning and the introduction when I sent this out to the introduction to the site, which you can all just Google. It's JEANIE-Joe, which has all these things, and you can see what this WordPress is about and see all the stuff that has been incorporated into it. You can just click on and it'll show the videos, the YouTubes, the list of resources to find the books, etc. And this is sort of and something that I will add on to in terms of answering these questions that, for example, Storybook puts out or that letterer speaks to. I will do that in terms of writing my own, similar to what Kim did. He's the starter of this effort, at least in our group, and that will be added to this particular site. And my family, my children, my grandchildren, hopefully my great grandchildren soon will be able to participate in this. And this is what stimulated it which I wrote to family and friends. Since Jeannie's death, I spent much time thinking about the meaning of her life and our life together. There are a number of books that I've read over the last year, see the link, that have been helpful to me in thinking about these topics. And one of these books, Finding Meaning, The Sixth Stage of Grief, David Kessler asked readers to think about the following questions. How can you honor your loved one? How can we honor ourselves? Thinks about, turn it to ourselves. How can you create a different life that includes them? How can you use your experience to help others? Given these questions and my other readings, I thought by sharing the topics below and the links above, I will celebrate Jeannie, help myself and others move forward in life with elements that brought meaning to Jeannie and my 59 and a half years together, and create a synergy, affect a life, or stimulate an individual's or a couple's thoughts and actions in the present. Love to all. So this, I think there's a lot of stuff that I've thought about and dealt with in the last year and a quarter that I'd be happy to, happy to help anyone who wants to think about those things or deal with it. It's a great site, or as you start putting together those things that we're talking about. There's some wonderful stuff on that Genie-Show site.
See, yeah, a little levity, we did something similar with my father.
Yeah.
Died on his 95th birthday. But with the last question, we asked, is there anything you're taking to your grave with you that we're never gonna know about? And he said yes, and then that was it. I mean,
And you're never gonna know about it.
yeah.
Relative to that, I was talking,
What's like, did you video? The response?
No, we're just.
So that's, you know.
Yeah.
I did that. All too briefly with my mother.
Yeah.
When she was in her early 90s. And asked her some questions, like, and I put it on video, and I wish to hell I had done it with other relatives in that generation.
Yeah.
Right.
it's so true. I wish I'd done it with my father and my father-in-law. So many stories that we just missed. And hopefully hopefully my children will ask me those questions. Although I heard of someone who had all these love letters to his wife, and the children wanted to read that, and he said, they're going into, her burial site without you seeing them. That was it.
That's said by somebody who wrote to Jeannie every day he was at Trinity, every day. Anyway, other people who have gone about on any of these things, whether it's the financial, the historical perspective, the passing on values, how do you do it, Scott?
First, I wanted to talk about inadvertent legacies. When people don't know that they have left something that's important to me. So I wanted to say that even though I didn't graduate from here, somehow this collective group of people has stayed with me in a most positive way. And I thank every one of you for contributing to something that maybe you didn't know you were contributing to, but it's meant the world to me. In terms of my own legacy, I've got 7 grandkids, and I have a rather complete shop. So I've been making tables, boxes, and just giving them away. So that's what I do. And some of them I've signed, of them I haven't. But they'll be around, I hope, for a long, long time.
More needs to be said about that, because he just kind of threw it out there. He showed me some examples, and I really wish you, if you're comfortable handing a few around, because they're very clever design. And it's a artistically very, very high level. I think that needs to be said.
So one of the things that you raised up, you signed something and you didn't sign something. There are all kinds of issues about legacy when you're donating something, and we as a class have created a legacy here with the 1968 scholar, which we've raised enough money now that we should be able to fund our scholars in perpetuity. We'll talk a little bit more about that tonight, but a lot of times, right, you contribute in some way to a community effort or a charity. And for some people, it's very important to do that anonymously. And for some people, it's very important to do that so that a classroom or a building or something bears their name. So it just the choice that you've made to sign some and not sign others.
Well, I signed one that I gave to some friends because they asked me to. And then I thought, I don't like that. So I may do that, but I just given stuff to friends and because I think they like it.
What did people think about that issue about?
I'd sign them.
Well,
I don't even think twice about it.
yeah, but more broadly, the issue about know, whether you give to things wanting to have some attribution. And God bless Paul Rather's been so good to this college. We have the Rather Library.
Yeah.
And I know nobody begrudges, it's just an interesting choice as we think about legacy.
I have one, my wife and I set up a charitable remainder trust here, like by 2001. And so we get income from it, and then when we go, the college gets the dough. Here's the one regret, it's kind of stupid, but I funded it with Lehman Brothers stock. And I should have funded all my Lehman Brothers stock into that. But I think about it, I mean, both it all went away, but this thing, survived. There's gonna be a scholarship fund at some point for somebody. And we're both pretty happy about that. And in addition to being part of the class scholarship, I think this class scholarship was great. I think it's important to.
And we will have 3 of our scholars here tonight, so there'll be some tangible reflection of results. Rich, I know you, in addition to the class scholarship, also, like Steve has done some stuff for Trinity.
One of the things that was life shaping for me at Trinity was a summer that Ben Jaffe and I went to Mexico City on an exchange program. It was a Dartmouth program, but Ben knew someone at Dartmouth. He got us in. But during that summer, we lived in Mexico with Mexican families. We worked in a kind of a slum area. And for me, it was introduction to Latin American culture and to the relationships I had with people there that were very outstanding. At the end of well, we started a soccer game after work with the local guys. Then at the end of the summer, one of the guy was the captain of the team, came up and he said, he said, Richard, we've had guys come here before. We never got to know them like we got to know you guys. It's been great. And with that, he gave me a trophy that his team had won. I was really touched by that. And I thought to myself, did any of my Trinity friends ever give me a trophy? But anyway, based on that decision or on that experience, I applied to the Peace Corps in Brazil and went to Peace Corps in Brazil, which was also a very life-shaping experience. To kind of provide that kind of experience for Trinity students, I've started a fund called the Cross-Cultural Internship Fund or program, where we give Trinity students an opportunity to work during the summer in a culture that's not their own native culture. And last year was the first year of the program, and there was a woman, a student who went to Kenya, who worked in the environmental studies program there. Now she wants to go back. She wants to go into environmental studies when she graduates Trinity. Another fellow who was in the program went to Denver, where he was an Hispanic guy. He was working in a school that was multicultural. He had such a good experience there. He wants to do that when he graduates from Trinity. So these kind of cross-cultural experiences can be very powerful. And I think we live in a cross-cultural world, where we live in people of different racial, ethnic, national backgrounds to ourselves. And it's incumbent upon us to learn how to work with them, how to live with them. And I think that giving people a chance to do that during the summer while they're still undergraduates, I think is an opportunity for that kind of mindset to sort of take place and prepare for the future. So, I would like to think that perhaps one of my legacies at Trinity will be this kind of cross-cultural summer internship program, and people getting a chance to work and to understand and to navigate a culture different than their own.
Others who have thought about how to pass on like.
So, it's one thing to give away money, and it's another thing to provide people with a sense of the values associated with giving. And so, one of the things I've done is, because I don't have a ton of money to give away, so I created a donor advised fund. And then every year, at the end of the year, around the holiday season, I contact somewhere between 15 and 30. Both people in my family who are of the next generation down, but also the children of friends, next generation, and say to them, I'd like you to give away X amount of dollars. It will be done through this donor advised fund, but you tell me both who you want it given to and a little bit about why you picked that organization. And I say, you can only do one or two because you have to make enough of an impact when you give it away. And this has turned out to be something I've been doing now for about 15 years. And different people, and sometimes the same people, but it's the idea of so that they think about giving themselves or giving back, that this is a tradition that is worth keeping. And so it's more about the value of the giving than it is probably about the total dollar gift. And I was using the donor advised fund as a way to do that because it's not their money necessarily. Then I started offering people the ability to put money into that donor advised fund and then to continue that process. So it's really about the values associated with it that I'm trying to put out in the next generation there.
So I've done something very similar, primarily for the reason that you said, that is to understand the benefits of giving. So for Hanukkah every year, each of my 9 grandkids, I say to them, okay, you're going to get some Hanukkah gifts, but you're also going to direct giving, because part of the holiday is you need to understand that giving is important, and you need to do some research as to where you want me to give money on your behalf. And you would need to tell me what you've chosen and why you've chosen.
Very similar.
Yeah, very
almost identical, just
And
different system.
Yeah. But it's a great way that you're involving them in actually doing. You're not just telling them about the benefit of giving. You're not just talking about it. You're having them participate in it, and hopefully, and I'm sure your hope is the same, it becomes a habit.
Yes.
It becomes a habit, so that when they think about the holidays, they think about giving.
So it becomes a thought that comes up when the holidays come on. Right. I mean, that was the concept. And
Great minds think alike.
yeah, I don't know how it happened. The other thing I've done is I started a nonprofit organization that does historical research, and one of my advisors is right up there. And what I tried to do through that program is primarily using oral histories, is to start to document things that I think are important that are happening as part of our lives. And by that, I mean the community, not my personal life or anything. So for example, during the pandemic, we did oral histories of frontline people who were working in the pandemic at the very time it was happening, with the idea that that starts to document what was happening when we were alive. Not necessarily associated with me or values or anything, but just more of a documentation. And the issue with that is finding repositories so that they can be accessed, and finding places where accessing becomes valuable or important. And that's the trickiest part, and that's the part I'm probably doing most of the work right now and trying to identify where those places would be.
Give us an idea of how you're doing.
Okay, so 3 ways on repositories. One is, if the topic, for example, on the pandemic, the University of Minnesota has a medical history program. And so they said, we'll take them and we will put them there and maintain them in our library, both transcripts and audio. So we've got those. The second thing that I've now recruited very young people to come up with ideas on how to use basically any kind of, it's similar to your WordPress concept where you're finding a way to make it a little bit permanent, but get it out there. Also YouTube, taking a look at getting it on YouTube so that people can access it if they want. So it's a way to document what's been going on in our lives. I started originally with HIV/AIDS as documenting the providers and what their experience was, both pre and post 96, which is when the antiretroviral drugs became available. So it was a death sentence at one point, and it was a chronic disease.
Yeah.
So it's enabling people to kind of understand that, which was an important part of our lives growing up, and many friends, etc., were affected by it. Anyway, it's a way to kind of document that.
Yeah, I've been through that down in Tallahassee where I now live, but the Florida State University has a digital archive. And they were able to take all our church records and histories, and now we're doing oral histories from really old folks. And it'll be digitized and it goes into a website maintained by the university, and we're probably too old to figure out how to get to the website now, but but it's a great way to save everything. And I think a lot of big universities do this, and they don't charge it a nickel.
And all you have to find is champions within the university who think that would be a good thing.
Well, they'll have the universities will have historians, they'll have digital people, and you're right, but you got to connect with one somehow.
Yeah.
But that's what we did that, and it's just been great.
So the next phase of what I'm trying to do with this is get enough young people on the board so that the nonprofit can exist in the future, doing the same kinds of things. So the idea of documenting what's been going on during lives that otherwise might disappear.
Has anybody done oral histories of themselves, if you will, for future generations? We've talked about doing it in writing with the story work and stuff that Joe has done, but just wondered, because as I said earlier, I regret that I didn't get my parents more on video and talking about their stuff.
The closest I've come is about maybe 20 years ago. I had this idea that I called talking portraits. And it was essentially getting a family together and just having them talk about things that they were interested in, whatever. And I really liked it, but logistically, in terms of being able to edit it, put it together, get good sound and all, I just couldn't I was going to do it with business, and I just couldn't make it happen. And so I gave it up, but I always thought it would be, would be great. I mean, I'd love to see something like that with my own grandparents or whatever. And I think things have gotten easier now in terms of the technology to be able to do something like that for a lot of folks without all the rigmarole that was necessary at that time.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about it. I'd like to hear more about your book.
Would you really? The thing is, okay, well, so I was talking with a friend the other day about art generally. Okay, she's a photographer, and I was saying that when I think about it, everything I do is I want to be communicative. In other words, I think of doing it and sharing it with people. I don't think of doing it for myself. I mean, some people will do things for themselves. I'm always doing it with kind of like a broad audience, okay? And getting things out there is challenging. I had a book that some of you are familiar with called Apparitions, and it's one of these, I'll hand it around, but basically it's a then and now type book. But what makes it different is I'll photograph where something was, and then I'll get the historic image and I'll ghost it on top of it. So you get then and now in a single image. Like if you can see this little beach in South Boston, you can see the ghost of the Joe, you're looking over here. All right, the teacher. Anyways, you'll be able to see essentially what it's about. And one of the things I was gonna say, in terms of legacy, I did get a publisher, which if any of you have written books or tried, it's very hard to get your work out and around without a publisher. Because I'll self-publish, then just find someone who wants to distribute it. Even, friendly bookstore in your own hometown probably won't want to. So it makes sense in terms of getting it out there to have a publisher, even though you might be only getting $1.25 for a $45 book and nothing for all the time you put into it. So I lost a lot of money, but I don't even really think about that. Some people go helicopter skiing or whatever, and I'm disinclined to do that. And the thing that kind of pleases me is not that it's on a bunch of coffee tables, which is nice. But I started going to libraries, and it's in, over 200 libraries. Well-known academic and public libraries, and there's something about a book being in the library that to me, that the word legacy, in terms of just getting ideas out there, intellectual capital, not money, but just what we've got. And along something a little more current, I was gonna this is an article I did for the Atlantic. And well, it wasn't actually in the Atlantic. In fact, I didn't even submit it to the Atlantic. But it was for the, but yeah, you could say in general, it was for the Atlantic type magazine. I had the experience before of, yes, it's the Atlantic. Oh my God. A friend who has spent 35 years in law enforcement as a progressive came up with a very good piece about policing that was it was way above anything else you were seeing. And I tried for the longest time with him to get in the Atlantic and other things, and we couldn't get it done. So I decided I didn't want to spend the rest of my life trying to get my most recent project in there. In 2020, I decided, after having lived in cities, in and around cities my whole life, I would go live in a rural area to have the experience. And I arrived when COVID did. And I just finished like an essay on it that's 20 pages long and double spaced and all that, triple sometimes, when I wanted to. I was running out of whatever. So my initial idea was that, hey, listen, why don't I I'll put it on jump drives and I'll start distributing out of the back of my car. What the hell? But the one problem is that my jump drive didn't arrive yet. So everyone was going to get a nice little jump drive with 2 full size. I mean, not 6. These are 2 full size Reese's peanut butter cups. So what I will do is I will actually put my this would be open. I'll put a card in there, and I will, if you send me an email, I will digitally send you a copy of this thing, which describes my time in a small community being an observer. And I was motivated somewhat by.
Can you digitally send us the candy bars too?
Well,
I think they're giving them down, no?
yeah,
Where were you?
I think that's the best. I was in a place called Montrose, Colorado, and I think some of you may know that. It's on the western slope in Colorado. I live in Denver. It's about 7 hours from Denver, and it was good. I just went there without any real preconceptions, and I arrived when COVID did. I arrived right when COVID did. So some of my things that I had in mind of meeting people and all, you think would really, but it worked okay. It worked all right. And so I would love to share it with you when I just, as I say, I just finished it. And so if you send me an email, I'll go ahead and send you a copy. Okay, does that make sense?
And we
There
also,
are pictures. There's not,
That's what-
it's
yeah.
not just 20 pages of. And it's not APA style and all this, forget that, it's. It's loose. And so I has photographs and other stuff, and I hope some sort of controversial observations. There we go. I want to get a little discussion going because I've come to have some opinions about how about urban and rural attitudes. So I think that's it for now.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So
So
another-
why don't you hand these around? And
how about him?
Yeah.
Did somebody say you wrote a book?
yeah.
I don't know.
So you
Is
gotta
it
tell us about.
published to the general public, or is it just like a private?
Well, give me a little. I touched on, my legacy has touched on two,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's pay attention. Yeah.
We all
Yeah.
will get one of these.
Good, all right.
touched on two of Dan's things. One is the sort of who am I and what do I want to convey in the future? And the other is financial. But let me talk about the book a little bit. Basically, I did this book. I did this book for my grandchildren, my children, their children, to convey who I am. And all my experiences in life, my values, everything about it. There's obviously a thing on chapter because a lot of people, you guys included, see me as a sports figure because of football and track and all that kind of stuff. Same with my hometown. It's the same thing. So I wanted to put down a lot more, a fuller complexion of exactly who I am and have it done. And that's all I did it for. I mean, and then of course the publishing houses got in and it went into a bidding war. God. It got up to $1.98. Seriously. And so I did have this published. It's called Miles to Go, episode from a life half a live. And I've got maybe 8 or 10 copies in the car. Anybody who wants it. It's $20. Don't go on Amazon. It's on Amazon for 35. Don't do that. That's not worth 35. It's worth 20. I spent 25 to just get the damn thing published. Anyway, that's what I did that for. The other thing, the financial thing is, I come from Connecticut, Virginia. Some of you might know that. It's a small town on the Eastern Shore. By the way, got to give credit to my editor who actually, let me tell my wife I slept with her. There she is over there. Oh, it is. And she a yeoman job of editing this thing. Anyhow, and financially, Nancock is in a county that used to be one of the two most prosperous counties in the nation back in the 1910 era, due to the seafood industry and agriculture. And then the Depression hit and California opened up for agriculture, Maine and everything, everybody opened up for seafood and everything went to the tanks. And right now it's about out of 100 counties in Virginia, it's the eighth poorest. So it's quite poor. And so I've always been in the public sector, so I don't have a great deal of money, but and I've got 5 grandkids and nieces and everything, and 2 kids. And so essentially I put aside money for them, but I wanted to put aside money for my hometown and my home county of Accomack, Virginia, on the Eastern Shore, that little spit coming down outside of the Chesapeake. And so essentially I put aside in my will enough to provide about starting off at 50,000, I don't know, it won't be much, I don't think, but 50,000 a year for, in perpetuity. And basically it's to, support nonprofits, which are very big in my community because it is a poor community and a lot of work gets done by nonprofits. Yeah. And essentially, it's to give grants to nonprofits who are fighting, poverty and racism on the shore, which are obviously two of the biggest things in the South, and in rural provinces. So that's what I've done. My dilemma right now is to figure out who administers it. Right now, it's going to a community foundation, but they have a tendency to give money to fire departments. Nothing wrong with fire department, but at the same time, I'd rather not give it to the municipal, even a volunteer fire department. I'd rather give it to the nonprofits, so domestic violence, literacy council, whatever, really doing good works. And so that's my dilemma right now, is how to constrain that after I'm gone, because I won't be. But in any event, that's my attempt at sort of a legacy. And it's I mean, it won't be attached to my name much at all, but at the same time, there's an ego part of me that wants people to remember that there was somebody that given us. Yeah. Don't like that part of me, but it why not be nice? Be nice. Anyhow, that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
So I learned something about legacy and the transmission of values from my son a couple of years ago. When he was young, he loved watermelon. And I did too. We used to go out and get watermelons together and cut them up and talk about the texture of the watermelon and how sweet they were and whether they were good or bad, or whatever. I used to, as a matter of course, give him the sweetest part of the melon. I would give him, cut a wedge and give him the top piece, cut the melon up. I'd give him the center, the center sweetest bite. And so he loved it. I loved it too. And then about 5 years ago, he grew up. He had children, and then 2 grandchildren. We grew up, and about 5 years ago, he sent me a text, and we never talked about it. We never discussed this. We just enjoyed going on. And he sent a text, and in it, he had his son Jacob, who was about 5 or 6, and then in the background, and on the table was a kind of watermelon on the plate. On the center of the table was a piece of the melon, obviously the center of it. And all he said underneath it was, "Guess who this is from?" And it was very touching to me. And what I learned from it, what I realized was that I haven't talked about generosity. I haven't lectured him about it or instructed him about it. But somehow, and it doesn't always happen this way, because I don't, but in this particular case, he sort of took it in, and he made it part of himself, and he transmitted it to his son. And I don't always practice what I preach, but in this case, the sweetest part of it was that I was practicing and not preaching. And you talked about the legacy of people around you that we didn't even know they had a legacy with you or had an influence on you. And it was, he might have gotten the sweetest part of the melon, but he left the legacy to me, like the sweet memory verse. It sort of set a stage. So I don't need to, if I just live my values, I guess, if I'm able to live my value, whenever I'm able to do that, if someone adopts it or finds it important to carry on, that's about the sweetest part of the melon.
Very good point. Very good.
It's a great, it's interesting. One of the things that with our 68 scholarship fund that we try to look at when we look at the applicants for is who from their high school experience looks like they will adopt a view of paying it forward. That is, we're happy to help them with their financial aid, but one of the things that we hope is that that will reverberate forward. And I mean, we'll see over time whether our assessment is right, but it's similar to, although in our case, kind of more intentional. But yeah, certainly in many ways, the most important legacy you can leave is how you live your life, because that does influence. When I thought about that line that was in the write-up to this, which probably wasn't original to him, but I got from Mitch Apple, the author, Tuesdays with Doris, and whatever, 7 people will be there and stuff. And this notion that you die in 2 deaths, one when you physically die and one when no one remembers you anymore. But the more that I thought about it, kind of picks up what the play is saying, is it's not whether, it's not really that second death when they don't remember you anymore. It's when your influences have died out, which you hope in some ways never happens.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when your son Ian is passing on to his son, that's going to get passed on more. It may never be attributed back to you, but it will have continuing life.
Yeah.
So,
Well, somebody told me about when someone dies, the thing that the maybe most profound way that you can honor them is to find the thing in them that you respect the most or love the most and make it your own and live and carry it on. And that's really, I mean, that's I guess what we all want in some way is for something, you know, I mean, that's the most respectful way you can carry on a legacy, I guess, is to keep it alive within that trait within you. And you know, aware of the fact that you've had some losses recently and really touched by all of that. You know, I think about the legacies of the classmates we've lost and how they've impacted me and maybe carrying on, you know. I think Jerry Pryor, maybe wanted to be a better person. He had very strong principles and values, and he take more seriously some social issues or be more consistent in my addressing of those issues. So anyway,
And sort of relative to that, and also sort of part of the passing on some sort of a piece of history. Move on. About a year ago, I went to Normandy for the first time, and my namesake, Joseph Edward McNamara, my mother's youngest brother, landed in Utah Beach, D-Day +15, and then was killed in the hedgerow fighting about 28 days later. And it's very emotional for those of you who've been to Normandy, and particularly if someone who's you have his blood. And it's said to me that it's important for my children and their children, now those numbers 16 now, to understand that they have the blood of someone who did what he did in terms of landing on Utah Beach and then moving through the Battle of Cherbourg, and then learning the history of that, actually traveling in his footsteps and seeing where he was approximately killed after the Battle of Bloody Hill, whatever. But what I did was I collected some sand from Utah Beach and I put it in a little bottle. I now have 16 bottles, and we'll have a picture of him in his uniform. He left Holy Cross after 2 years to join the army, and have a picture in the back of the chapel at Holy Cross where his name is done, and with a little bit of history in that sand, with the understanding that hopefully that my children and my grandchildren will understand that they've got the blood of someone who sacrificed something for this country, And it really means something to me to do that and to pass that on, so it's another legacy type thing.
That is amazing. Truly amazing.
So on that subject have folks done. Or somebody in the family done family histories or hired people to do family histories. Pass it on. When I was at Trinity, I interviewed one of my dad's cousins. He was president of the Goldberg Bachelor Club. He got never married, but he knew everything about the family and the family history. And I'm not sure what motivated, but on vacation when I was home, I interviewed him for a couple hours on all the anecdotes that I knew would disappear.
You didn't tape
when he
it down?
died. And I typed it up and
I'll type it.
yeah, so I wasn't smart enough to video it, but I typed it up, and so that's part of that family history that, we passed on to next generations. But that historic perspective and letting folks know that.
And an artifact, like an artifact, like Scott, and, we all might have artifacts that really could produce meaning down the road for people. But to find that artifact that would have meaning, I mean, how many kids don't want, the Irish, silverware or the place that they're kicking around the house, kids don't want that, but something that has some historical
When they're
substance.
50, they'll want it. No, I think they will.
Right.
My father toured, it was like he was a writer, and I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, southeastern Pennsylvania. And he was deeply devoted to Lancaster County local history. And he lived to be 95, and he had literally thousands of books tied to Lancaster County local history. And he said to me, remember this, so I came in to see him, and he said, Michael, I'm going to give you all of my books. And I really didn't know what to say. And he did give me all of his books, and many of them are far from all of them. I kept and added to my own library. But many others I gave to the Franklin Marshall Library in our town. I gave them to the Lancaster Historical Society with the book plate, to commemorate my dad. And I thought that that sort of was the best way of creating a literary legacy for him. And sometimes I also have, it's an academic, I also have thousands of books, many of them in Chinese and esoteric topics. If I were to say to my children, either one of my daughters, oh, guess what, Louisa? I'm giving you my books. But one thing that my dad, I've been thinking about doing this. One thing that my dad did give me that was very precious to me is he wrote a 200-page memoir. And he was born in 1914. And, he grew up in the Orthodox Jewish ghetto in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And, surrounded by, my great grandfather lived with him. He spoke only Yiddish. Nobody could communicate with him. I mean, my grandparents could communicate with him. My dad barely communicate with him. And, but he began recording all this and recording stuff about his father and his mother and his siblings that I had no clue about. And one of the things that I prized about him was how sharp his memory was. His memory, he had an eidetic memory, much better memory than mine. And and many of the things that he recorded were very human, very, very powerful. And I've started working on something like this for my daughters, and I'm not as far wrong as my father got. But I think that's really a great project because often you mentioned genealogy. I mean, many families have genealogists. We have several genealogists, avid genealogists who I regard as producing often a lot of crap. And they're writing it and visiting cemeteries, doing this, doing that, and there are lists of hundreds and hundreds of names, your family, and usually you see the name and no one knows anything about this.
Yeah, right.
The person is just a name and maybe a set of dates in the genealogy, and to be able to flesh out your own life a little so that your kids understand something more of you. They're not a chance that they're going to sit down for, oh, Dad, can you tell me what was Trinity College in the 60s? Wow, those were wonderful days. We had a great time. No, put it, if you put it in writing, this is one thing about writing. If you put it in writing, there's a chance that somebody someday might read it. And, you'll be leaving a kind of permanent imprint. So
that was your father's legacy to you. I guess that you.
It was far more valuable than all those books he gave me.
And you're inspired to write
Yes.
back at some.
Far more valuable to me than the thousands and thousands of pages of books he gave me. Were the couple hundred pages that he wrote. I mean, they were so powerful. I mean, I have them in a place in my bookshelf in my bedroom, and I often look at that manuscript, and I think to myself, and I think many of you sitting in this room, probably when it comes to your elders, your parents, your grandparents, probably have the same feeling. You think, gee, there's so many things. If my dad or my mom, my grandfather was still alive, that I would like to ask, that I would like to know. So, carpe diem.
So this is good because, and our time is appropriate for this. This kind of brings us full circle. I know from talking to Kim over the years that he wrote his book, how much discipline it took to do that. I mean, he was up like at 5:30 every morning working on it. So in a sense, it brings us back to the story where prompts that Bill was talking about. It's nice to have that discipline imposed by, so I thought about this from friends, and I'm thinking of doing it for exactly that reason, to impose some required discipline on myself. In order, right, because I'm not gonna wake up at 5:30 every morning to write my life story like him did on that.
Yeah, there's just one addendum. I think they always gave us the choice of not choosing, writing about the question that they sent. You could always go to the list and write about something else if you wanted. It's still a prompt and somebody's pushing you, but you do have some choice.
I think what's also important in terms of writing or whatever, things that you may not think is important.
Right.
Because 10 or 20 years from now, it may turn out to be the thing that is the most important. As the world changes and stuff.
So I do, nobody will ever read this because it would be boring as hell. But when I turned 65, I said to myself, okay. If I'm lucky, I've got 300 good months left until I'm 90. And I started to write a journal. And I write in our journal every day, and sometimes I will write about, historical things that happened, like I didn't do yesterday yet, but I'm sure I read about 37 count indictment. When I next sit down, right? And someday, maybe some great grandchild, oh my God, can you believe, great granddad was alive when that happened, and he wrote about it. Anyway.
Just along that line of a certain kind of discipline, I found that, for me, if I just tell myself, I have to do some right. I don't have to do a certain amount of time or whatever. That is better than if I said I had to do 45 minutes, because if I really had to do 45 minutes, I go, all right, 45 minutes, how long has it been? And sometimes maybe it'll be a couple of hours, but all I know is I just have to sit down for a minute, and eventually the stuff came together. And but it's not in these, but please feel free to get a Reese's or one of these, and I'll be glad to send it to you. All right, let's go.
This is not directly connected, but it is one way. Apparently, Yogi Berra's wife asked Yogi, when you die, do you want to be buried or cremated? And he said, oh, surprise me.
I see you're saying, you don't come to my place,
They didn't know.
I won't come here. See you at 6:20 for photos.
5:30 cocktail.
Want to start drinking at 5:30?
5:30. The same place. For you. If you come email, it's on the downstairs.
You know, that.